everyone, and welcome to another Zoom Into Books presentation sponsored by Headline Books. Today, we are chatting with author Diana Hart, whose book is called Cauliflower Heart, and it's a trilogy. If you have questions for Diana during the presentation, feel free to type them into the comments, and we will pass them over to our guest interviewer, Burke Allen, who will be conducting the interview today. He's from Allen Media Strategies. So thanks so much for joining us today, Burke. Go ahead and take it away.
Thank you so much for watching our Zoom Into Books and for listening to the Big Time Talker podcast, sponsored by our friends at Speaker Match. And today we're talking wrestling. And author Diana Hart, part of the most legendary wrestling family of all time, the Harts of Calgary. Now, if you're not super into wrestling, this is going to be a great interview for you because we're not going to get too deep into the weeds on wrestling. I want to talk to Diana about her books, the Cauliflower Heart series. But to set all this up, if you can imagine, Diana's dad was a very legendary, successful promoter up in Calgary. It was a huge family. Her parents had about a gazillion kids. They were all connected, I think, to the wrestling business in some way. So we're going to talk a little bit about growing up in that world. So say hi to Diana Hart, joining us from the Great White North. Hello there.
Hi. Thanks for having me, Burke. I'm looking forward to this.
Well, I figure if I didn't interview you, that you actually have the physical ability to snap my neck like a chicken bone. So I thought it's best to go ahead and just talk with you and play nice.
Yeah, probably best. I've got that Greek temper, Greek-Irish temper. Could get out of
I've heard stories and I've seen videos, so I know this is all true. Hey, so I want to rewind back to when you were a little kid, and I wonder if there was a time or an instance, a certain instance that you remember where it first dawned on you, my family is not like anybody else's family in this neighborhood. My dad does not grab a briefcase and go to work, or he's not a truck driver, a blue collar guy. We're different. Is there something that you remember from your childhood that where that light bulb went off?
Oh, yeah. Well, the first time I saw my dad really wrestling was on TV. He was wrestling, so that they film it Friday night and they show it Saturday,
right,
the next day. And my dad was sitting in the kitchen and he had bandages and a white bandage, like a tourniquet around his head, and then he had band-aids on the skin. And then I looked on the TV and he was getting he was bleeding. He was wrestling this guy named Abdullah the Butcher. And I kind of realized there was something very different about that. Then
How old were you when this happened?
Probably 6. And I was very concerned, to say the least. And then when I go to school, because people would watch it on TV, but they would have these annoying, insensitive remarks about your dad's. My dad could beat your dad up. My dad was. They'd say that my dad was a phony, and it's like I was so upset because I had seen my dad, that image of my dad sitting in the kitchen with these band-aids and then the bandage around his head.
Sure.
It burned in my mind, and I always was defensive about it. And then over the years, things like a wrestling bear named Ted lived in the basement for a little while.
That happens to everyone. That's just another Thursday.
He was Teddy to his close friends, but but the wrestler, his name was Dubois. He couldn't. He was a legitimate mountain man, and he had taken the bear in as an orphan. And when he came to work for my dad, of course, there were no hotels that would let him keep the bear, so he left the bear at the house, and that just seemed normal. I mean, wow. Honestly, it did, Burke. I'm not trying to. I'm not. That's
just your normal life. It's just your life.
We had giants, Andre the Giant, and then who was a few times a year up at the house, and then there were the Billy and Benny McGuire, they were the heaviest twins in the world, identical twins. And they were, they were a handful.
When you say the heaviest, how heavy were the twins?
They each were close to 600 pounds, and they would ride to the ring on these little Honda motorcycles, the small ones. And so they had a deal with the Honda motorcycle company to show how, sturdy and capable and powerful these little scooters were, that they could hold the twins. So each twin, Billy would ride down, and Benny, depending on how wide the ring entrance was, either tandem or side by side. And then they do a tag team with usually a handicap match where it was those two against like 10 wrestlers or something. And they were nice guys.
Unbelievable.
There were the midget wrestlers. We always called them midget. I don't know that that's evidently
little people. They're little people.
But little people. There was Little Beaver, Skylo Low, Fuzzy Cupid. Those were the Coconut Willie, Wolfgang Kevin.
So the dinner table at the Hart household must have been really interesting.
It was. Burke, it was like they would come to the house and feel and a lot of them would come by for the summer or for a period of time where they needed bookings for 4 months or something, or longer. Like the Samoans stayed for a long time and had their kids in school, but they became part of the family, and you get to know their kids, and sometimes the wrestler's wife would take you out to the park or something, because my mom never drove, and to get to the park from where we lived would require driving, but to the river or something. It was neat. I think that my dad's promotion, with it being in this big house and having the 12 kids a part of it, it was unique and truly wholesome. Like, if it was an unsavory thing, I don't think my dad would have wanted his kids around it. But
can I stop you right there for just a second? And by the way, you're Diana Hart is our guest today, and it's a special simulcast on the Headline Books Zoom into Books program, as well as our podcast. But if you're watching the video, we're going to show some photos of the kids. But did I hear you correctly? Did you say 12 kids?
Yeah, there were 12.
Are you kidding me?
And when my mom and dad got married, my dad had the mumps at a vulnerable age, and my mom was born quite prematurely. So they grew up believing that neither one could have kids. And then when they met and married, they thought, we can't have kids, but if we could, how many? And they had this figure in their head of 16 kids for some reason. And anyway, about 9.5 months after they were married, my brother Smith was born. And then, 11 kids later, Owen was the last. I was the baby girl at number 11. Owen was number 12. Yeah.
Was there any food left for you as number 11 by the time the meal happens? I mean, my God, you'd starve to death. 12 kids.
Well,
I mean, what does the grocery store even look like for your mother with 12 kids and a whole bunch of straggling wrestlers that come in?
My dad was pretty innovative. He made some, he actually learned how to cook really well. He learned a lot from my mom's mom, who was Greek. And, but he had everything industrial size, because there were 12.
Yeah.
Well, more than 12 kids. There was always the extended family. So it was so neat though, Burke, because everything in our house in the kitchen was industrial. Like our pots for spaghetti were what you'd see in a restaurant. And when you're little, you don't realize that, you're trying to help your older brothers or sisters carry something, but it was I imagine my dad thought it was, and my mom thought it was kind of cute watching the little ones trying to help with these gigantic pots and pans and big spoons, because it was all like, you know, cafeteria style, but it was really neat. And now when I'm cooking, I've got some of my dad's old pots and pans, and someone said, "My God, that's a big pot. Can you lift it?" I was like, "Yeah." I was full of water and spaghetti, but just like Paul Bunyan in the bull, you just get used to carrying these things as you grow up. And boy, well, I made a good impression that night with the big spaghetti pot. It's weighed about 15 pounds. Anyway, that's Andre the Giant, and that picture was me out at my dad's, out at Clearwater Beach.
He looks like he can put you in the palm of his hand at that age. What, you were probably what, 9, 10, somewhere in there?
Yeah, I was so scared of him, but when then after you know, he must have been used to that with little kids and stuff, being kind of terrified of him. But he was really nice. He was really nice to Owen and me. And I remember he let us try his ring on. Well, he let me try his ring on, and it just fit right over my hand. So I was a little bit younger than that, but
there's a photo there of your mom too, and your mother, I have to tell you, is just beautiful. I mean, could be a movie star. Oh,
thank you. She was half Greek, half Italian, and a scholar. She was the first woman or first girl to be accelerated in the New York City school system, and then they put her ahead another grade. She was just, it's funny because she was premature. They didn't have great expectations for her, and she turned into this little prodigy. And they were positive she was going to, you know, marry a president's son or something, and she married my dad. But
well, hey, look, anyway, he was like the president of the wrestling world. And there's a picture with you with all these brothers. So as a girl growing up around, you know, and also being the daughter of Stu Hart, you know, you grew up around a lot of tough guys.
Yeah.
What was it like as a girl, a sister, a daughter, growing up around tough guys?
It was, my brothers were really, you know, they're sweethearts, but we did, especially me, Owen and Ross, we had some good scraps under the dining room table, and I do feel I got a lot of self-defense technique from just, you know, silly things that you fight over, like who was going to hold the cat during the Flintstones that night. There's, you know, but you could get into a real, honestly, it was submission style wrestling, but you'd end up rolling around under the the dining room table, which was a huge table, and the cat was wondering where this was all going to end. But yeah, my brothers and sisters were always really protective of, especially Owen and me, because we were the babies, and my mom and dad were pretty sad, as even though they had 12 kids, we were the last ones. So it's like, these two we've got to look after these two. So we were, I think I have a little bit of a feeling of entitlement sometimes when I'm around but that's the way my brothers and sisters want it to be. They just don't really let me do a lot. They dote over me still.
You're still the little one. You're still the number 11 out of 12.
That's right. I'm not really.
Diana, I grew up in a town, a blue-collar town in the mountains of West Virginia. It was a coal mining town, and it was almost predestined for the young men of that town in that era that you're going to go into the mining industry. You're going to be a coal miner like your dad was, like his dad was before him, like his dad was before him. And I wonder, growing up in this wrestling business, the 11th out of 12 kids, did you think, you know, this is my lot in life, this is what I'm going to do? Or were you one of those kids that sort of rebelled against it and said, I want no part of this?
Oh, that's a great question, Burke, because it was both, except it's like the opposite. I wanted to be in the wrestling so much. And my mom and dad had, I mean, at that time, it wasn't really the thing for girls. It's not like how it's become now, where the girls are brands, and they're like the successful divas now are as successful as some of this most I guess most successful Hollywood, like the Kardashians. I'm thinking, the Bella twins, look at how far they've come because they were successful and attractive, what they call divas now. They're hardly divas, but they're really good, down to earth people. But my niece Natty,
one of those stars, though. I mean, in the 1990s, you were on screen for the WWF, and you transitioned to that on-screen role, and you did it at a pretty prominent level. For people, again, that are watching or listening that may not be into the minutia of wrestling, you were a big doggone deal. And I know that you were actually ringside at what is sort of, if you follow wrestling at all, considered one of the greatest matches of all time. You were at this wrestling match with your husband, the British Bulldog, and Bret Hart for the SummerSlam 92, and there were like, I don't know, 80, 90,000 people at Wembley Stadium in London. You're right there. And of course, we see, if you happen to be watching, we see your picture on a big screen at a match. Take me back to that time in your life in the 90s. And specifically that SummerSlam in 1992, can you describe what that night was like for you?
Oh, it was terrifying. Honestly, it was, I was so worried about what was going to happen between Bret and Davey. I had seen them wrestle for my dad. And when Davey and Bret went to WWF, I wasn't really ringside that often up till that SummerSlam match in 92. But one match they had in Calgary, I remember Davey walloped Bret in the ear and cracked Bret's eardrum, and Davey got a cracked rib wrestling Bret. And I mean, they just tried so hard, and their goal wasn't to knock each other's teeth out. But when they wrestled, it was of the utmost importance to them, to a priority, to make the fans know that they were wrestling for real. Because I was saying earlier, we took great offense in our family to be called fakes. So right. When Davey and Bret were wrestling in Wembley, Davey also had been suffering from a really bad staph infection. And, when it happened, we didn't know what it was, and they caught it in time. It was about the fourth day that this infection was spreading. It's like the flesh-eating disease. Yeah. And he might lose his leg. But it was under control at this point. But they said, if we hadn't caught it in the next day, he could have gotten that serious that he might have lost his leg. So he couldn't do anything. They said, you can't stimulate your leg, you can't exercise, because that's going to feed the infection. So getting over to Wembley like a month later, he was like, I don't know how I'm going to do. And he was on these really strong antibiotics. And, and I kept thinking when he'd fall on his knee or bang his leg or his thigh, I thought, in my wild imagination, his leg's going to burst open like fat on beef stew when it's starting to freeze, I was, and the leg never was that, it was from the inside. It wasn't seeping wound, but in my imagination, I was so, I honest to God, Burke, I was so overwhelmed and terrified. I did an interview for that, and I was and ringside, and there were, just to walk to the pitch, Shane McMahon picked me up from the Royal Box where the security for the royal box was quite offended that we were in the Queen's box. You know, this is for royalty, but
it's literally the royal box you were in.
Yeah, and Vince McMahon and the WWF had arranged for Davies family and Harry and Georgia Davies and my kids and all of our extended family to be up there. And my son Harry says now, he said it was like watching, like he could hardly see anything, and he would have, he probably would have appreciated being at ringside, even though he was only elementary school age. But when you know, like when somebody hit the mat, because it was such a massive arena, there was like a delay in the sound. So you see them hit the mat, and then when you're out in the box, then you hear the noise.
3 seconds later, 4 seconds later, sure.
Yeah. So when Shane picked me up on foot, it could have been a plane though, because it's such a big place. He kept saying, "Don't worry, Diana. It's just, it's live though." I was like, "Oh, okay, no pressure, no pressure." And it was such a long walk, and I was getting pretty worked up by the time I got there. And I thought, I hope neither one of them gets hurt. I hope Davey's leg is all right. I hope, and I didn't know who was going to win. I thought, I just hope whoever wins. Like, what if Brett wins? How
do you console your husband? Yeah.
Yeah, so when he won, when Davey did win, I was kind of stunned, and then I went in the ring. I kind of waited, and I went in the ring, and he gave me a big hug, and he said, "I hope that was okay." And I know I was really emotional. Everything at that, and I gave Brett a hug, and one of the most incredible moments in my events in my lifetime, you know, and it's hard to, you know, it's like, I don't know, like, well, I'm not stuck on it, but
well, look, that's a seminal moment in your life, and
yeah.
For most people who are watching or listening, you know, you have one, maybe two of those kind of moments in your life, but your life has been filled with those. By the way, we're talking with Diana Hart, if you're just joining us on the Zoom Into Books program and our special simulcast with the Big Time Talker podcast on the Blog Talk Radio Network from the first family of wrestling, the legendary Harts. And she's also the author of the Cauliflower Hart fictional book series. And I want to talk to her about that. We're talking a little bit about wrestling here. But, you know, you've gone on to write these award-winning books, so I want to make sure we spend some time on those. I did have a couple of wrestling fans who sent me a couple of notes to ask you about, and one of them they asked me about is when you were a kid, you were growing up, and there was a training area that your dad trained in and trained you and your brothers called the Dungeon. And I wonder if you can tell me, was that a real place, and were all these stories about the dungeon true, or has it all been sort of embellished, or does it lie somewhere in the middle? Tell me about the Dungeon.
Oh gosh, the Dungeon was it was like Narnia and eerie. So my dad's house was this 1905, which for Calgary is an old home. It was a mansion, but a sort of farmhouse style. My dad really did beautify it. He made it very opulent with these chandeliers that had names and oriental rugs that he'd get from hotels that didn't need them anymore. But where can you put a 20-foot long, 15-foot wide oriental rug? Oh, well, Stu Hart might have a place for it. So in one breath, we've got, or one side of it, a 3-story house, and then the basement. You've got Chippendale chairs and oriental rugs and chandeliers and this commercial kitchen and all kinds of animals running around. And then you go down the dungeon. So the dungeon had cast iron grate stairs, like this the kind of grate that's on a sidewalk over like
right.
Marilyn Monroe was standing on when her skirt flew up.
Yeah.
That's what the stairs were made of, and they were really steep. And it was just a completely different feeling. As soon as you opened the kitchen door to go down to the dungeon, it was cement and old brick walls that had the stucco and the wood. It was really rustic. There was an incinerator down there because it was 1905, and we used to say that's where we buried we burned the bodies. But a real incinerator, like you could climb in it. And it was this big brick incinerator, and then there was all the mechanics of this big house, and big iron doors that scraped the floors, the cement floor when you opened it. So even to open the door, it was like it was really very tactile. And then you get into the dungeon part. My dad had all his weights and handmade, my dad was really creative, and he knew he had to, and he had his own welder because he was building rings and stuff. So he had the welder, he designed weight equipment, and he had all this really hardcore weight equipment, and then this wrestling mat, which nothing. It was like really stiff wool underneath it, like no give in it. It wasn't like there were springs, and it was only about say, I don't know, 6 inches deep. Right. And oh, there, sorry, I thought I had my phone shut off, but somehow, anyway, okay, Burke. So the walls had this knotty pine wrestling mat to ceiling, and that's what the wrestlers would get thrown into because there were no ropes. And these old windows that had like they're just heavy duty windows with like a cage put in between the glass. Back from when the house was built in 1905, it was just and then the ceiling had there were all these holes in the ceilings from where, guys would either put their feet through, and because it wasn't a high ceiling, but either their heads through the ceiling or their feet, and the hot water pipes it was fascinating though. And then the dogs and cats used to like sleeping down there because they were all over the house, but there's a lot of if you had allergies or anything, that was just like, well, that's too bad, you're gonna have to train. I remember some of the guys were getting a little red. He had a terrible allergy, and he's like, and nobody had any patience for him. It's like, you're letting your allergies get the better of you when you're getting stretched. But
this occurs to me that your childhood may be the most unique one I have ever heard in my life.
Oh, wow.
And I'm trying to put myself in that era, and I see a beautiful young blonde Diana Hart, and maybe Diana and I go to high school together, and I want to ask Diana Hart out on a date. I want to ask her to go to the movies or ask her to go out for ice cream. And I'm trying to imagine coming to a house with Stu Hart and a bunch of wrestling brothers and a dungeon in the basement. I'm wondering if you ever got asked out for a date as a high school kid.
No.
Yeah. And then on top of that, you go on and you marry Davey Boy Smith, who sadly has passed away. And I'm wondering what your dad's reaction was to you marrying somebody else in the wrestling business. Was that a good thing or a bad thing, or what was that? Or what was your dad's take on all that?
I think my dad was, as he got to know Davey, pretty impressed with him. I mean, he was right from the start. Davey and his older cousin, the Dynamite Kid, were two. I mean, I guess I could be I'm biased here, but I equate them to the Beatles and kind of with Brett and Jim and Owen Brian Pillman. It was kind of like the Beatles, although Davey and Dynamite were from England. They just were so revolutionary. And when I met Davey, I was, from the minute I met him, I was smitten. I loved his accent. And so my dad was kind of concerned about this because I was only 17 and that, you know, never had any boyfriends, but nobody would go out with me because I was like,
scare the crap out of them. There's no way I would get within 100 feet of you.
Yeah.
Knowing who your dad was, your brothers were, and you're a lovely lady, but it would have scared the crap out of me. So how old was Davey Boy Smith when you guys met? You were 17 and he was
18. And my dad and my mom were like, well, you haven't given anyone a try. It's like, well, no one wants to go out with me. Like and I did connect with Davey, and you know, he certainly worked hard and it was, you know, a phenomenal athlete. And over like from 81, we met in the late spring of 81, and then 84. Well, 83, we got engaged. In 84, we were married. But at 83, it was at my sister Allison's wedding at the house. And I didn't know Davey was going to ask me to marry him. Actually, we were fighting at the time. We were having like this 2-week-long argument. But when he told me on the porch, when he asked me to marry him, and I, you know, threw my arms around him, he had the engagement ring. I said, what did my mom and dad say? Because I, you know, thought I can't say yes if they don't say yes.
Sure.
He said, well, your dad was okay with it, but I think your mom almost fainted. So yeah, my mom was still thinking I was going to meet somebody like what her mother wanted for her, you know, meet this. I don't know. I still don't know who could have been better for me than Davey, or better for Davey he was pretty extraordinary. And then, you know, we went on to have our kids, Harry and Georgia, and my mom was, I named Harry after my mom's father, who was Harry Smith, an Olympic marathon runner from New York, and a real kind of like a Stu Hart in his field of running. You know, everyone loved him and knew that he would never do. He was just one of the nicest, most honest, sweetest guys from what my mom and dad, particularly my dad, he just had a real kinship to him, or with him. He just like he was Harry Smith's son. Almost. My grandfather had 5 daughters and no boys, and no athletes in his family. His daughters didn't want any part of running, and they met my dad and was just loved him like a son. So that kind of worked. That was kind of how it went with my dad and Davey. And my mom was always fond of Davey, but after Harry was born, it was, and then my mom saw what a devoted father Davey was. She was just like in love with Harry. My mom was, she just melts when she'd see Harry, almost like crying, you know, oh, Harry. And, you know, they were really close, my mom and Harry. So anyway, it was, you know, maybe if I know my mom would have adored Davey. Just when we had kids, though, it seemed to change.
That's the slam dunk. Grandkids are the slam dunk. That's what you know, brings it all together. Diana Hart is our guest today on Zoom Into Books and the Big Time Talker podcast. And not only from the First Family of Wrestling, but she's an award-winning author now. She's won Indie Book Award finalist for a romance novel. She got a silver in the Reader's Favorite International Book Awards for Best Sports Fiction, Hollywood Book Festival. I could just go on and on. The London Book Festival, runner-up for Best Romance, Southern California Book Festival. So these books, this book series is called Cauliflower Heart. What does that mean? Cauliflower Heart.
Well, my mom had always, she was a very good, very creative, and truly gifted writer, and she had always talked about writing a book, and she was going to call it Hearts and Cauliflowers, and it was H-A-R-T,
Right.
like our last name. And I had written an autobiography a long time ago that just really went sour. It just didn't. It was just, and unfortunately, it just didn't. It kind of ostracized me. It came out sounding very cruel, and so when I started writing again, it's like I want to write fiction, but I do feel like I've got a lot of credibility, and write about what you know, and you maybe can do well with that instead of me
That's
trying
right.
to
And I should say that, Diana, your novels, if folks aren't familiar with them, they take place in and around the professional wrestling industry, but they're
yeah
romance.
yeah I just like in wrestling, there's and boxing, be a lot of these combative sports. If you notice, some of the athletes have these hardened ears. They look like cauliflowers. And so the term cauliflower heart or cauliflower ear, it's like a badge of courage, which I have in the beginning of the book, is just so if you do get a cauliflower ear, it means like you had the heart to get one. Like it takes, it's really painful too when you they start to harden. And so it's a bit of a play on words. It's like to get a cauliflower ear, you've got to have the heart to and take the beatings to get it. But instead of making it H-A-R-T, because I didn't want people to think the stories are specifically about me, I made it H-E-A-R-T and brought into it like the heart you have to get the ear.
Right.
But I do write from experience, and it's fiction, but a lot of things are things I know well about or heard about, and I've really tried to fictionalize it because I don't want to have anybody. I really don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but at the same time, when you're writing, if someone wants to think that was them, I hope, so, well, it's funny, Burke, somebody asked me, they said a character in this story, his name's Toasty.
Right.
He's one of the main male characters. They asked, they said that was a specific person. And I said, no, actually, I hadn't even thought of that person. I said, no, that Toasty's a culmination of about 10 characters all in one. And, but they saw me at one of these book festivals, and every time they go by me, they would say, no, that's so-and-so. And I'd say, well, if you want to think that, you go right ahead. But actually, Toasty's, some points he's my brother Owen, and some points he's the Dynamite Kid, and sometimes he's my brother Ross.
You blended a bunch of people together there.
Yeah.
And I'm sure in other places you changed the names to protect the innocent and guilty,
Yes, right. Very, very true. I did that because it's really so therapeutic to write about my life. Or what maybe I didn't see it with my own two eyes, but I realized that it could have happened somewhere else, or I heard about it. And I'm not trying to steal from anybody's experiences, but I'm just trying to bring it to life. And when you see a movie on TV, like I saw Ron Howard's movie Rush a little while ago about the race car drivers,
Right,
Mickey
right.
Lauda, and there were things in that, and I thought how much I could relate to it, even though I never drove race cars or was a part of that world. But when somebody can relate to my stories, fiction, albeit they're fiction, I feel like I've accomplished something.
Well, you bring people into that world a little bit, and folks that maybe are not, super wrestling fans, you bring them in and you sort of pull the curtain back and show them some stuff. And I did know that in just checking you out online, because, that's what we do these days, Diana, we Google people. And
Yeah.
I saw that you've been very outspoken in your criticism of the WWE and Vince McMahon and sort of the role he played in your brother Owen's passing. And I wonder what your current relationship is like with wrestling today and the WWE and Vince McMahon.
Well, it's great. When Owen died and I was 99, there was a definite break in the family. I happened to be, it's just, Burke, it was so, like, the timing of everything. Davey had a broken back, and it got infected, and I think he always had this staph and virus sort of active in him. He used to get infections, and anyway, he was let go from WCW, and because he had the broken back, and he was in the hospital for a couple of months, and Owen would come by and visit him, and Owen was with WWF at the time. And Owen got a phone in Davey's room and set up he said, I talked to Vince, and, we'd like you to come back, and you talked to him though. And so, it's like 3 weeks before Owen died, and these talks were going on, and Vince was great. He said, we'd love to have you back. We don't know what you can do, but maybe manage Owen at first. It's like, and when Davey heard that, it was like a shot of adrenaline. He was just like, started to sit up better. And, it was a second chance for him. And he was in really bad shape though. And then Owen died. And then I remember Vince coming, and Stephanie and Shane and Linda, and that's Linda's Vince's wife.
Right.
They were as heartbroken as we were. And my mom and dad were, the Owen's death finished my mom off. She was just, and then this lawsuit got started where they wanted everyone to, join on Martha, Owen's widow, who was suing WWF. And I said, well, Davey, it was an accident. And I was following my dad's guidance. And I think my dad was, as qualified as anybody to lead in how we were going to go. My dad didn't want a lawsuit with WWE, and he lost his son. He was not trying to get anything out of Owen's death. Not that Martha wasn't entitled to it, but he just said this can be settled without going to court. And I took my dad's, and Davey was working for Vince now. Well, that kind of followed in the months to come, but I never had an issue with Vince over Owen's death, and I think he did. There was a lot of criticism about the show should have been canceled at that as soon as Owen. But Owen wasn't pronounced dead until he got to the hospital, and I don't know what. I remember my dad saying it. I wouldn't want to be in Vince's shoes at this time, and. Right. He said, I don't know what I would have done if I was doing the show, but like, it's not like there was a rule book on what you do. And
we should probably tell our viewers and our listeners that your brother, Owen Hart, was killed tragically. It was a big pay-per-view TV event.
Yeah.
And it all happened, and everybody who was watching, saw this fall. Are you still in touch with his widow, Martha, I know that she was on a Vice TV thing. There's a show called Dark Side of the Ring that she was on.
Yeah.
Recently. And are you in touch with her, and what is that relationship like at all?
It's yeah, I mean, I actually haven't spoken to her since Owen's funeral, and I have tried many times, and then after a point, it just was no point, because it just like she didn't want anything to do with us, and she didn't let her kids see my mom and dad, which was unfortunate because they missed out on a lot, and my mom and dad missed out on a lot. But the Vice TV show, I'm not sure why they did it, because everything was, I mean, I'm still talking about it now, so I'm kind of a hypocrite in saying, why are they talking about it 21 years later? But right. I'm not sure Martha, what Martha was, because she did kind of pick the scab open, or pick the scar open to make it a scab again. I don't know. I thought that Vice should have interviewed at least some of the Hart family members. It seemed one-sided, and at the end of it, it was certain family members were, I think how she put it, well, I can't remember the word now, because then there were a couple of family members, she said, were getting in the way of, and I suspect that was me and my sister Ellie, who she was talking about. But
I think that when that happened with your brother, it was at a time that this whole notion of professional wrestling being, as you said earlier in the conversation, fake, it finally opened it up that there are real things that can happen to the men and women in that profession. And I imagine that, as you went back and wrote these books, these Cauliflower Heart books, although they're romance books, you're in that wrestling industry, there have to be misconceptions that people have about that whole business. And the fact that people can get hurt, as you talked about with your dad as a little kid, that's your first memory, is your beaten up and bloody dad at the kitchen table. Would you say that's the biggest misconception people have about wrestling, is that there's no athleticism, that nobody really gets hurt?
Yeah. Yeah. And to this day, to this minute, when it's a sore spot for me and my brothers and sisters. And I think that's why they were as good at, that's why Brett, my brother Brett, was so, he had made such an impact in his interviews and stuff. It was really coming from his heart. And I've heard other wrestlers say, oh, Brett took his role too seriously, and he couldn't separate the hitman from, the character from the person outside of the ring. But that's how much it meant to Brett and all of us. Like I hear somebody, I hear it all the time, Burke, and I try not to, it just depends on, I guess, the weather or something, it could affect me more. But someone will say, your son, say my son is, he does grappling and he's a fantastic wrestler. And, does he do the MMA stuff, or does he do that fake stuff? And it's like, he doesn't do he does wrestling and he does MMA. No, but does he do the fake stuff? That's all. It bothers me so much because, Harry, his dad, my brothers, I know Owen didn't die from a drop kick that, broke his neck and killed him in the ring. He died from a fall, but,
people can really get hurt, and they can be hobbled up for the rest of their lives or worse. And I know that these books, by the way, and I see them behind you on the screen there, and congratulations. I should say congratulations on all those awards. That's fantastic and quite an achievement. You released that first book at WrestleCon in London. And,
right.
And so some people who are big fans, when they come up to meet you, what do they want to know about your life? Because there's so many fascinating aspects. Is there like one or two things you get asked an awful lot?
A funny one, which I don't mind, is just can I put them in a headlock?
You're afraid to ask that because you might just choke me off and then I'm done and that's the end of my career. That's funny.
I get that a lot. It's so funny. Or can I put them in a sharpshooter? And it's like, well, I'm in a dress, so it's not going to be very sexy. So I can't do that one. I get asked a lot.
Your bodybuilding photos earlier, and I'm sure you still look like that, and you could still do some serious damage if called upon.
I've got that Irish Greek temper, start to swinging and stuff. But actually, I'm if I had wrestled professionally, I would like to think I would have been like Brett and Owen put together, because I loved Owen and I used to do a lot of gymnastics and stuff. But I tried to get into wrestling again, too much, too little, too late, around in the 2000s, early 2000s. And I remember hitting my head repeatedly so hard. My brother Smith was trying to teach me. And I thought I would be the worst wrestler. I did not have that confidence that I had when I was, 15 to 25
when you're bulletproof at that age, you just think that everything's going to be fine and what can happen.
Yeah. When I was doing stuff with the Hart Foundation, they looked after me so well. Davey's like, don't worry, I got you covered. But so I actually could be kind of I was supposed to be kind of a little tattletale pest in the ring, getting in the way and throwing coffee in Shawn Michaels' face and tripping someone. But I mean, if I didn't have their honestly, their timing and everything was so good, I wouldn't do a thing without their look from Davey or the nod from Owen, like now and then. But they made me look like I was half tough. But I think if I had to, roll around with somebody, just out of sheer stubbornness, I might be all right. But I know some
pull it off. I see it.
Well, I might give you a mean pointy elbow to the eye. That might hurt worse than anything by accident. Just like.
Hey, who's that guy on the cover of your latest book? That guy looks familiar.
That's Harry. That's my son, Harry. He was, he's wearing his dad's vest, leather vest, but Harry wrestles now as Davey Boy Smith Jr. And I hope he's WWE bound again soon. His father, Davey was recently inducted into the 2020 Hall of Fame, but it's like graduating and we haven't had the ceremony. You've graduated, but with the coronavirus, they weren't able to have the WrestleMania or Hall of Fame back in early April in Tampa. So that aspect of it has been, like the awards, has been postponed. But Batista, the Bella Twins, Tatanka, Davey, there's a lot. Those are the ones I know of. Oh, sheesh. I feel bad for the ones that I'm not mentioning because they're also distinguished and
a lot of icons in that business.
Yeah.
You mentioned coronavirus, and I wonder if you are privy to how much that would, this pandemic affects sports entertainment. I know that I work with lots of, musical entertainers, and all those tours are canceled, and it affects thousands of people, not just the entertainers, but all the behind the scenes people, the sound people, the lighting people, the venues, the ticket takers. So I would imagine this is very tough for the wrestling industry as a whole.
Yeah, it is. It's been a challenge, to say the least, for everyone. Like Harry was supposed to do it the day after the Hall of Fame. He was going to fly out to do a big tournament in for All Japan for this big cup, which Davey had won back in the 90s. And so it was quite meaningful to Harry to compete in this, and it got canceled. They're not allowing any wrestlers from anywhere outside of Japan to, and that's Japan. Then there's Canada up here, all the local, they weren't allowing anything bigger than at first, like in March, nothing bigger than a crowd of 20. And I mean, you couldn't even get away with a crowd of 20. That's just not happening. But I know WWE is they've taken big steps to they've got Corona. They're testing them before they go in to and they're doing all of their, when they do filming or taping, it's at the NXT, the Performance Center in Orlando. But yeah,
there would be no way to socially distance a couple of wrestlers, I would think. I think that'd be difficult.
Yeah, that's true. You know, they were oh gosh, you know, Burke, it was, I think when I was watching some of the wrestling, you know, I hope I don't sound like I'm like, who is she to be saying? But when I saw some of the wrestling, like with my dad's wrestling and the stuff that I saw Davey and Dynamite do on tape from Japan, and I just grew up with the main thing was to wrestle. You're focusing on your opponent. You're not, whatever you're doing in the ring, if it's good, then the crowd will appreciate it. The crowd will react on its own. You don't need to look every few minutes to the crowd to, you know, hey, did you like that? Or, you know,
Oh, I think we've got a freeze on Diana Hart there. Diana Hart is the author of the Cauliflower Hart book series from Headline Books. And my goodness, what an incredible life and incredible career that she and her entire family have had. The Hart family, the most legendary wrestling family of all time. We're going to wrap it up here. We're actually out of time. Look at that. Diana Hart, our guest today on the Big Time Talker podcast, powered by Speaker Match, and on Zoom Into Books from our friends at Headline Books. Special thanks to Kathy and Ashley and the whole Headline Books family. And if you'd like to pick up the Cauliflower Hart series, they're available at headlinebooks.com, amazon.com, barnesandnoble.com, and wherever books are sold. For Diana Hart, I'm Burke Allen. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Now go out and make it a great day.